What's going on YouTube? It's your boy, Ali Shally, aka the Monochrome Man. Today we're going to be talking about one of the key topics in photography, composition. I always get asked, how do you shoot that? Why did you shoot it like that? How should I shoot this? All of this and more will be revealed in today's video. So, let's get involved. Topic number 1.
Hello, good people of YouTube. I'm here to say I've launched a Patreon. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Patreon, but what's going to be on this one? I'll tell you. There's going to be videos released before they're released to the public. You get early access. There's going to be unseen photographs that I have not released anywhere on the internet or indeed in a gallery.
We'll do some unseen material.
Unseen material. We shoot so much content during the filming of these films that there's so much extra stuff. Breakdowns of my photographs, like the stories behind them, settings, all that kind of stuff we're going to put into videos within this Patreon as well. There's going to be a chat. So everyone who's into black and white photography and these videos in general, thank you, by the way, everyone who's subscribed. There's going to be a chat there, which I'll be dropping in on to answer questions, and hopefully you can meet some nice people in there who are into similar things. Sometimes it's quite isolating being a photographer where you don't know people, and it's always nice to join a community and be part of that. To begin with, it's going to be just one tier. It's going to be $5, and there's going to be a lot of cool information on there. There's one more thing that we forgot to add. For the first 500 people who sign up to Patreon and support our YouTube channel, we appreciate this, and we want to mark it by making some downloads exclusively available to you, some high-res images of mine, which you can take a closer look in, see the detail. You can print out if you like, and these will be available, like I said, to the first 500 people. I think it's worth saying that if you support us on Patreon, it's going to allow the channel to do new things and to expand and to bring in some more people and to really make this into like an exciting big old channel. My aim with my YouTube is just to spread the knowledge and share the love of photography with as many people as possible. YouTube's a wonderful place for that, but these videos take a lot of time to make and a lot of energy, and so it really would help. The bigger the budgets will be, the more entertaining and hopefully the more informative that they'll be. We'll probably be adding some more stuff as the Patreon grows, hopefully. If you want a better understanding of how I work, how I shoot, and meet some like-minded people, why not give it a spin? Thank you for supporting this channel, everyone who watches this. It really means a lot. We appreciate it, and we hope that you can get some more great learning and have some more fun through the Patreon as well. Anyway, peace out. Thank you. We'll see you on there.
I think that's great.
I think that's great too.
Common misconceptions. I get asked a lot, how do you compose a photograph? It's a bit of a non-question really, because aside from using my camera and doing this with it or this, there's not that much between two shots that's often the same. It's the same as the settings that you use on your camera. If I said to you, what settings do you use for your photography? You probably go, I use lots of different ones depending on what I need to shoot. And it's the same with composition. If you were with me and we were in front of a scene and I could show you an option of how I would frame something or how I would compose it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily right. That's something to keep in mind throughout all of this, and to be aware of people who tell you things that are definite, because it doesn't exist. So, number 2, the rule of thirds. It's something that a lot of photographers hear very early on in their development as a photographer, and for good reason. It's something that I use quite a lot, and in some scenarios it can be a really beautiful way of shooting. So this photograph here was shot in London near Sloane Square during the lockdown, one of London's lockdowns. It's about the only way that I could have got this shot, because normally this area is full of people. But rule of thirds, it's about leaving 2/3 of the frame open and 1/3 with a concentrated viewpoint on it. I think it's got something to do with the golden ratio, that spiral that it appears in nature so often, these proportions, and the third, it's just a very natural way to position a subject. The thinking is what's the most important. So I was in front of these mannequins and I thought, these are interesting. Where do I put the subject? I thought that mannequin doing the funny, like surprise kind of look was the most interesting one. And so I thought, let's get the subject close to that mannequin. So you can see the subject is bang on that left-hand side third. And the top and bottom thirds are also neatly taken care of. The framing of it is very central. I've gone for a low down angle so I can shoot it flat like this. But that is an example of the rule of thirds. Number 3, trimming the fat off an image. So here we see 3 young boys in Vietnam watching a game of football. What is trimming the fat off an image? Let me explain. This is one of the most important rules with composition that I can give to anyone because it really does apply to any photograph in any style. Don't have excess amounts of information in your frame that don't aid the story or the point that you're trying to make with your photograph. With this photograph, the central clear theme is these 3. You can't mistake that. A lot of street photographers tend to assume that you will understand the point of their image without really honing in on it, getting rid of the unnecessary details. So when I say trimming off the fat, I mean leaving the essentials for the image and not 1 pixel more. And that is a skill that is honed over time, and it requires you to be decisive at the time of shooting to understand what it is that you want. In some ways, composition is very much linked to conceptual ideas. It's linked to having confidence in executing those ideas and making your decisions. In this image, you've got on the bottom left down here, you've got these, you can see with the bokeh, through the bokeh, just enough left that you can see there's something going on. So you've got that information there, they're watching something. You've got the net, which I really liked, and it's got these leading lines that lead into the subjects from all directions. You know, it's just, everything's pointing in towards them. Even this tree line here and here, leading into these guys. Everything is working towards the impact of this photograph. And also the umbrella is in its own space. Nothing is clashing. Tonally, nothing is clashing physically. They're not quite in the middle here. You see, they're slightly offset to the right-hand side of the frame, and I could have put them in the middle, but based on the action going on down here, these boys, they're part of, like the guys playing football in the background, they are part of the image as well. And if you think about these 3 as linked, it balances itself. So that's what I mean about, you know, it depends what you want to say with your image and the point of it and the priorities of how important things are. You should have a clear defined area for your lead subjects or your only subject, and then the rest should make sense and have harmony with that, with the image. Otherwise, you're just going to be causing a lot of confusion and doing yourself an injustice there. And that is something that you shouldn't be doing with cropping. It's something that you should try and get as best as you can in person and get up close. If you need to crop a little bit or balance the image out, whatever. But nothing beats being in the right place with the camera and letting all of that sensor or the film be useful for you. So this was done on a 24mm, and I think it's using everything that's good about a 24. It's wide, but it's also intimate. It's making use of the geometry that's available through this fence. And I think overall, it's a pretty decent composition. Number 4, making use of leading lines. This example is a very obvious, it's like the most extreme use of leading lines ever. There's leading lines everywhere apart from where the subject is. So everything is pointing and guiding towards. They're used to kind of funnel the eye into a certain direction, and the sidekick to the leading line is the use of light and tones. So in black and white, very heavily dependent on tonality, and you need your subject to be in somewhere that's well lit, otherwise it's going to be very distracting. And here, in this portrait, everything I think is working for me. You've got the clear gap where the eyes are. Everything should be pointing towards your subject if you're going to be using this kind of technique. So here's a very different scenario where I've made use of leading lines. So You've got the subject who's in the bottom third, so I'm using the rule of thirds. It makes sense when you look at it, but there's a million ways you could shoot in a place like this. I've chosen to go down. I was using a 16mm lens, angling up to exaggerate, using the distortion from a 16 to exaggerate the drama of these lines. In French, you say chaque chose dans sa place. Everything in its own place. I feel in here, you've got the black, dark tones of the tree cutting through the image from the corner. You know, so I've on purpose, I've framed the image so that that tree is down in that bottom and it's rising out through the frame, and it's balancing with where the subject is. I think now's a pretty good time to say, you're getting quite a lot of information out of this, hopefully, so why don't you have a look at that subscribe button and consider pressing it. And if you don't, let's turn off the screen for a sec. Yeah. Have a good hard look at yourself, reflected in your own phone or laptop. There you are. Why aren't you subscribed? All right, back to the video. Number 5. Use of the center of the frame. I'm going to use myself in the self-portrait for this. It's quite an obvious thing to place your subject bang in the middle. On a battlefield or on a chessboard or a boxing ring, you control the middle, you have a lot of power. And it's the same with a photograph. Something that's centrally placed and everything's working towards it in the center is extremely eye-grabbing. And it's worked in, this is way before photography. If you go to the Louvre in Paris, you'll see a lot of very centrally placed characters. And that's because the center of a frame is a bleeding obvious place to put someone. You still have to find harmony with everything. So in this frame, I noticed that everything here seems to work. I stick out really clearly in the middle, and I've been able to boost myself in post a tiny bit to lift it and to make myself a bit more obvious. You could argue that it should be cropped in a bit more, but I really liked the banister here. I like all these different lines interacting together. And it's got it's quite handy. This glass panels on the ceiling were forming a nice kind of grid for me already, which was quite useful to use. Because I've thought about this stuff so much, now I just tend to rock up at a scene and I'll know very quickly where I'm going to be framing something from, because I know what I like. I use the same lenses often. I know what those do. All of this stuff falls in and works together. So yes, let's move on.
Do you want to mention anything about, do you use grid lines on your camera, on the Leica?
Yes, Biz has made a great point. I do use the grid lines on my camera quite a lot, and especially when I'm shooting with a 16, with the ultra wide angles. I find that having the 3x3 grid lines up on the screen on my M11 or whatever camera I'm using, it's hard to tell when you're perfectly level with a 16mm, because things kind of distort on the edges and it can be a little bit disorientating. By the way, Patreon, click it. What am I on now? Number 6, framing and subframing. And this one I think is really, really crucial. For example, in this shot. So let me talk it through. One, it's using quite a few of the lessons that I'm talking about here. So rule of thirds, ching, it's on that third here, close to it. I think it's quite a simple image. It tells you everything that you need to know. I'm using the leading lines of the tracks coming around the whole way. This section's called subframing, I hear you say. What's the subframe? This area here is very clearly kind of the box where you'd want to frame someone to me. And so I based a lot of my decision making behind taking this picture around the positioning of that light. So I set myself round, I made sure that the tracks were running into the edge of the camera frame. You know, it's these small little decisions that can really help pull off better and better pictures. There are so many different examples of subframes. Here's another one. So in this shot, I've positioned the camera really, really low in order to get access to this giant V shape that's coming from the horizon into the foreground. The overall shot is the frame, but the subframe is this streak going through it. And it's obvious that I wouldn't try and place my subject's head on the corner here, because it would get lost in the tones or in the way that, in this particular image. And so I was waiting in this spot for a while, waiting for people to walk past me so that I could capture them in exactly this position. And I'd planned it all out, and I didn't plan for two people to come, and I didn't plan for his head to luckily be caught like this, but I knew that this area here, this little kind of concrete strut, whatever the hell it is, from here to where this building is in the corner, this was my area. And I originally had the idea to place the subject's head in the middle here, but based on how it ended up being, I adapted to it and got it like this. Street photography is always about hoping for the best, but being quick and able to adapt. 7, balance. This image isn't a traditional composition like some of the other ones might be, but in the case of this image, I saw this about to happen. I was on the Isle of Wight, which is just off the south coast of England. I was there and I believe I had a 50mm lens on. I saw this kid running in the distance and I saw this kind of tone, this line of sand that was elevated above the waterline. Originally I thought that could be a leading line going straight to him from left to right. Imagine this woman wasn't here or I'd cropped her out. It would still, it wouldn't really work as well, this image, because it's like, why did you place this subject so far over on the right, like it seems a bit unnecessary, but it makes total sense when you put her in, because they're in similar places but the scale is different and they're connected from the head by this leading line right there. So in many ways I think this is quite a clever composition compared to some of the others that are a bit more obvious. It's always fun when you get one like this where it's unorthodox but it makes sense, and I love trying to figure out shots like this. The gear doesn't matter. It's all about the ideas and about the intent and the execution. That is what it is. And composition is just a vessel for transmitting your idea in a beautiful way. This could not be more different to the other shots that I've shown you, but it kind of fits. It's still using geometric elements. It's quite minimal. It's got enough to tie itself in with my style of photography that I think it doesn't stick out too much. This is a good example of unorthodox composition that works. Tip number 8, making use of your environment. The Oculus. So the Oculus, it's near the memorial site for where the Twin Towers went down. This is why I love being a street photographer, because unlike studio photography or commercial photography, we have full license to use the world to get ideas out of. How expensive would this shot have been to set up in a studio? Using the work of great architects is such a privilege. And I found this shot there. So we're talking about using your environment to help your compositions. Symmetry is a big one for composition. And this has got lots of repetition, symmetrical elements to it, geometric elements to it. I'm using the glass to create that split aspect. So I've got my camera over the railing, so you've got to make sure you strap it on really carefully, otherwise you don't want to drop it. Big lawsuit in America. And then, so I've made use of my environment here to get a better composition, and that is something that isn't unique to street photography. I think landscape photographers, obviously, And let's go into the really interesting ones now. These tips are going to be for our Patreon subscribers, so let's have a look at this one. Photographers who I really admire, who are fantastic at composition, if you want to check out their work, like Ansel Adams' incredible work in Yosemite National Park. You should have a look at that if you haven't already, of seeing how to make use of incredible geometric and leading line elements out of nature. He's the master. Also, Bill Brandt, he did these incredibly cool compositions. Steve McCurry, always so good at it, always has been, still is. Fan Ho, one of my biggest inspirations, one of my favorite photographers, based in Hong Kong. He was shooting in the 1950s, I believe, in Hong Kong, and wonderful use of composition, a lot that could be learned from those photo books. Cecil Beaton as well for portraits, really fantastic use of composition. Oh yeah, Sebastião Salgado. I mean, he goes without saying, he wins all the awards. The final tip would be, think for yourself and don't rush things. Go into a shot with the intention of what am I trying to do here? And if you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just walking around randomly taking pictures, that's not good enough really. That's not photography. You might as well just go around and film everything in 8K and then just pull stills out of it at the end of the day. Photography is trying to make an order out of your environment with a camera. And a big part of that is composition, and you're missing out if you're not thinking about this deeply, because it makes you a really much better photographer, and it can help you figure out what it is you're actually trying to say. This has been a bit more of a serious video than the usual ones. If you want to see a funny one, click on these ones. Comment, like, and subscribe.